Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. My name is Dr. David D. Schein, and I am known for being an author, attorney, and a professor, and do all sorts of other interesting stuff. Today's show is the Global Politics Show, and we have a great guest, Ian Pelham Turner, who is a political broadcaster and an expert on the British royal family. And I've been fortunate enough to have recently been in Scotland, which is part of the United Kingdom. And so I got a chance to see a little bit of the campaign, which was their equivalent of a presidential campaign here in the United States, which of course we have rolling right now. So I think everybody's going to enjoy our discussion with Mr. Turner.
Good afternoon, David. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. You know, you're seen in Britain as a leading expert on the Republican movement, and so we've got a few questions. But if you just want to know a little bit to start off with about the election that you talked about and the new government.
I think that would be great, Ian, because I don't think the man on the street, as the cliche goes here in the United States, understands the ground shift that you have just been through after 14 years of what we would consider the conservative or Republican leadership. And you've had a mega switch there in your country, right?
Absolutely. And so basically, the Labour Party, equivalent to the Democrats and US, have had a sweeping majority 6 weeks ago, in which they promised certain things, and already they're tanking. I can tell you straight away that since Sir Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister, has come into power, he's lost 20% points on his popularity already. And every single day, he's now being vilified right across the country for some of the situations and values that he's now bringing out with the Labour Party and with this huge majority that he has as well in Britain that he never talked about during the general election. So one of the biggest things for me is that I'm 73, so I'm a pensioner. So in Britain, we have obviously we have a pension scheme, and that's paid for during our lifetime, to the government, and then we get a pension after we're 65. So I get my pension each month. But we also, because of the huge costs of weather conditions, energy costs as well, we get a thing called the winter fuel allowance, which has been statutory really with all the governments for the past 14, 15 years. The first thing they announced when they came to power is that was going to stop. So the thought process at the moment is there's going to be millions of pensioners this year in Britain who will be shivering under blankets and hot water bottles, trying to keep themselves warm, because the big phase, the big issue that they have in Britain is either eat or heat. And so I think the reality at the moment with it, and since that time, all sorts of things, it's like every single day, a new idea has come from the Labour Party that has really gone even further down the road of what on earth did we vote for, because this is nothing what we voted for at all. And probably the latest thing for the American audience to understand as well is that at the October 30th, in about 6 weeks' time, we will have our annual budget from our Chancellor of the Exchequer, the lady who decides how much the government is going to spend, how taxes are going to rise. Now, the reality at the moment is Sir Keir Starmer in the Rose Garden, which is at the back of number 10 Downing Street, on Monday announced that this was going to be severe cutbacks, severe measures were going to be taken in this time leading up to the budget on October 30th. And that because the Conservative government, the previous government, had left a 22 billion black hole. in the economy, which they didn't expect, which they didn't know, and which they expected never to have happened. The reality since that time is that every single day, hope has been taken away and fear has been put in its place as well. But what it's also meant is that they have already said there's going to be cutbacks for all the different services after October 30th. And that is what we would call austerity by the back door. Now, David Cameron and George Osborne, who used to be the Prime Minister and Chancellor in 2010, they used exactly the same method of putting fear against everything and then creating austerity against Tony Blair's government. And now, in return, Sir Keir Starmer is using this same tool, we think, against Rishi Sunak and the former Conservative government. So at the moment, if I can explain to you very briefly, Britain is in a state of turmoil. Over to you, David.
Okay, well, I have a lot of questions about that. So, was this austerity program anticipated even if the existing government, the conservative government, had been reelected, or is this some type of big surprise that has come up since the new government has taken over?
I think the reality at the moment is that there was going to be some shocks. We knew that basically I think we're something like about 2.2 trillion in debt right now. And so, and they've got to sort of cut down the amount of expenditure that they're doing. But at the same time, they've been facing over the past 2 to 3 years major union problems with strikes happening. And this has brought really, I think, Britain sometimes to its knees as well. And so just to add like a triple whammy on their opening statements, in one hand they're saying, okay, we're going to cut 9 million pensioners and we're not going to give you your winter fuel allowance anymore, leaving us cold and hungry. And on the other hand, they're going to give a 15% wage rise to the rail workers and other unions as well, so that they don't go on strike anymore. And so basically, just to finish, so they gave 15% to the rail workers who took that money and have now come out and strike again.
Oh my goodness! So when did they get the 15% raise under the Labor Party, or they got it previously?
Literally within 3 days. The doctor's strike was cancelled as well, and they've got, I think, 12%, 15% now. As you know, I mean, inflation in UK is what, 5%. It's just around about 5%. So they've got 3 times the amount of inflation. So they found, and so that's what's caused mainly the big issue of this 22 billion. The 22 billion, they are saying, was caused by the Conservative Party, would you believe, because they didn't pay the railway workers, the doctors, the teachers, and so forth, the money that was expected. And so now they're having to pay for that. And so there's a black hole in the system. You know, welcome to the political balmy world of Britain at the moment.
Well, Ian, we have some fascinating parallels here in the United States. I note that the former UK operation in Canada, that of course they've been controlled by what we call liberal or labor side government for a number of years. Their 2 major railroads went on strike recently, and the government stepped in, and there's the same power in the United States to order them back. So they've been ordered back for 30 days. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But there's a great deal of concern about the Canadian economy, and it's parallel here. One of the things is that here in Houston, which is one of the largest cities in the United States, the firefighters union did not have a contract for 5 years. Houston just elected yet another Democrat mayor, so there's not technically a change, but it's a new Democrat mayor here in Houston. And one of the first things he did was to cut a massive settlement I don't recall the exact number, but we're talking billions of dollars to give these folks back pay, where some of these firefighters are getting $200,000 checks, which is a whole bunch of money. And they kind of missed one part of the story. The city of Houston does not have the money to actually pay this big settlement. So it's kind of interesting. On the federal level, parallel to your situation, your pension, of course, as you know, in the United States, is called Social Security Administration. Here in the United States, Social Security does not have a trust fund. That was an oxymoron. There is no trust fund. It's the good faith and credit of the government. Ha ha. And so what's happening here is that they're projecting that the Social Security system will run out of money in 2030. And it's interesting because if you look through the subjects that the two major parties are fighting about in the national election here, Social Security has come up as a football, saying, "Oh, the Republicans are going to cut Social Security. The Republicans are going to cut Social Security." A little scare tactic by the Democrats, and the Republicans saying, "No, we're not going to cut it." The underlying problem is that whichever party wins, they're going to have to figure out pretty quick how they're going to finance that. Plus, as I'm sure you know, that the national debt here has surpassed $35 trillion. In fact, a stunning statistic with the current federal funds rate and so forth, over 5%, is that they're talking about the interest on the federal debt next year will be greater than the federal expenditure on national defense.
Yeah.
So there's some great parallels here.
It's amazing at times, the cost of borrowing. So the cost of borrowing for what we're borrowing at the moment is it costs us £1 million every 6 minutes. That's the cost of borrowing. In UK right now, these figures are staggering.
Yes.
Quite frankly, first of all. But do you think, either party, but do you think President Trump, if he comes back into power, do you think he'll borrow more? Because he's got this tendency to think big, hasn't he?
Well, this is always interesting. I'm going to draw a parallel back to the last populist Republican president, who was Ronald Reagan. And as you know, I have a book out called Decline of America, where I talk about American presidents. And my Republican colleagues are not happy with me because I assigned Uncle Ronnie, as I call him, a C+. And the highest grade I gave to any American president in the last 100 years was a B- to Harry Truman, by the way, who happens to be a Democrat. So a little balance there. But one of the things that people do not pay attention to is that Ronald Reagan was not concerned with balancing the budget and stabilizing America's finances. He was buddies with the head of the House of Representatives, Tip O'Neill, very famous fellow. And they were kind of drinking buddies, if you will. And so Tip O'Neill was okay with what Ronald Reagan was doing because he was emphasizing national defense. But parallel to that, they kept increasing social services because that was Tip O'Neill's hot point. So Ronnie got the national defense, but Tip O'Neill got all these excess social programs, and they didn't really pay attention. So not a true conservative. And I think the reason I bring that up first is because I can see the parallels to Trump. Remember, some of the initial COVID funding happened under Trump's, because 2020 was the kickoff year, was Trump's election year that he lost, but it was also the COVID year. And the government did spend a lot of money during that year at a time when the government was not bringing in as much money. And so this careening debt situation, you can fairly say, if you're a Democrat, started under Trump. The problem is that the Democrats put it on steroids, as the cliche goes here. And that's where this national debt has just skyrocketed under the last 3.5+ years of the Democrat administration. And there's got to be a stopping point. Neither party there's not a plank in either platform to control the national debt. Both parties, of course, are talking about controlling inflation, and indeed, the United States has pushed itself toward a recession by forcing up the interest rate to, frankly, a relatively normal level of 4.585, whatever it is right now, is not that high a national funds rate, and actually could be a conservative inducing rate over time. But unfortunately, I do think that while the Fed in the United States is complex, but the story is that the Fed is independent of the political parties and of who's ever in charge. That's, of course, bogus. The Fed's very likely to lower the rate in September. And in fact, the stock market, as you know, has done very well in the United States, but largely driven by the fact that they have already priced in the reduction in the federal funds rate. But I think that is being done to timing to help the Democrats in the national election.
What do you think it will come down to? Because obviously this is one thing that we've been looking at as well in Britain, because obviously the Bank of England, the equivalent to the Fed, in reality follows suit. You know, they all come down together. And there was talk that it might even come down to about 3% or something. You know, that quite an extreme amount of interest rate reduction. What do you think it's going to come down to?
The projection has been either a half a point reduction in September, or a quarter point in September and a quarter point again in either October or November. So the projection is at least a 0.5% cut before the end of calendar year 2024. And one of the things that's happening is mortgage rates, which float with the Fed rate to a certain extent. It's a complex situation, but they are not directly linked, but they tend to float together. Mortgage rates have already trended down from a 20-year high in the low sevens to 6.5, and you could probably buy, if you wanted to pay extra points, you could probably buy that mortgage down just under 6 right now. So the rates are kind of anticipating again that federal funds rate cut. I'm personally, and again, I like most Americans have some money, very modest amount in the stock market. I'm not overly concerned with the literal funds rate. I'm more concerned with the overall economic activity in the country. And we're getting very, very mixed messages. A huge political blow to the Biden-Harris administration. And I don't know if you caught this headline early this week, but they reduced the employment number from March of 23 to March of 24 by 818,000. It had been projected that there were about 202.2 million new jobs created, and it's more like 2.4 million new jobs, 1.4 million new jobs created. So this is a giant reduction. And of course, it gives Trump the opportunity to say that the Fed agencies have been lying to try and artificially pump up the struggling Biden-Harris administration.
I mean, I think, in Britain, for example, we have 9 million unemployed. 9 million.
That's a bunch. What's your percentage rate? How does that percentage out?
I mean, so voting rates, is and sort of work rates is something like about 25-30% of the working population. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's been put down to ill health after COVID and other measures as well. And I think, the reality when you're looking at things like this as well. I mean, the question I was going to ask you is, do you think they'll put more money into the economy to actually increase growth? The reason why I ask this is that the whole ethos of the Labour Party right now is that they want to create growth. Now, when I listen to what they're doing right now, and every single day they're coming out with a fear factor. Every single day, something else is going to have to happen. Something else is going to have to happen. People are not going to spend money when they're afraid of what's going to be happening in 6 weeks' time. So I don't get it in the first place of why on earth that's going to create growth. If you are the expert on growth and growing America, what is the answer?
Well, I can tell you that the American retail economy is booming, and it's concerning me because I am not a Democrat or a Republican. I am actually more of an independent, and I'm a true conservative where I favor very, very limited government, dramatically smaller government than we have. And but one of the things that concerns me, being a business professor and an observer of the economy, is that we have exceeded $1 trillion in credit card debt. So
Yeah.
the theory that we're hearing is that during COVID, a lot of people stayed home. Some of them still got paychecks or got government handouts. They saved money by not commuting, not buying lunch at work. They worked from home and still got paychecks. And people banked money. The savings rate in the United States had hit a new record. Well, what's happening is now that people are supposed to be back at work, the economy is supposed to be back rolling along, people have continued to spend at an unusual rate. And the theory is they've already, say about the first of this calendar year, exhausted those excess savings and are now into pure borrowing. And I think $1 trillion of credit card debt is like, wow, we've got a spending problem. The trouble is that when the rope snaps, as the cliche goes, that I think that the economy, which again rides on retail in the United States, is going to have a big adjustment. And we've already seen a large number of, one of the things I track are bankruptcies. Many household names in the United States, as we call it, different retail chains in several different industries have gone bankrupt. Restaurant chains, modestly priced restaurants, have gone bankrupt and closing hundreds of units. Some of these restaurant chains were 500 or 600 stores. I mean, closing 100 restaurants, you say, well, that's only 15% of their total number of restaurants. Yes, but each of those restaurants probably employs from 25 to 50 people. So the reality of the economy is very difficult to judge right now. My personal opinion, it is not nearly as healthy in the United States as the Biden-Harris administration would like it to be, as they are running on, oh, look how good things are. And people are running around. And unfortunately for the Biden-Harris administration, if you poll the man on the street, 60 to 70% of the people will say, I am not as well off as I was in the last year, the Trump administration. That's the reality. And I think that could be the ultimate decider in the election between what are two unpopular candidates. Let's be blunt about it. Trump is a difficult person to like. He apparently has a wife. It's wife number 3. But I don't think he's Mr. Lovable. He doesn't try to be. And Kamala Harris, there may be people out there who really like her. I've never had any use for her. One of the statistics I would give you on Kamala Harris is that her turnover of her personal staff in the vice president's office is over 90% of the 47 or so people that have worked in her office since she became the vice president. That is an extraordinary statistic. So just as Trump made very poor choices in his cabinet, he did not do well there, but she does not seem to do well in terms of just getting along with people.
I mean, we face very similar problems in Britain. Really, cost of living in Britain was the number one key factor. Immigration was number 2 in the UK. So it really follows the same trend as America at the same time. But one of the biggest problems in Britain right now is that people got so used to being at home, working from home, that now a lot of recruitment agencies can't get people who want to go into an office anymore. Do you have that type of problem in America?
We're having the exact same thing, and I did want to mention quickly that we're down to about 4 minutes here, and
Okay.
we may have to kind of put some closing comments in and give people some teasers so that they come back and join us again. But what is your projection? What happens next in Britain? Like, I don't know that you're on a 4-year cycle like we are with American presidents, are you?
We're 5 years, so we're destined for 5 years now.
Wow.
So my prediction, first of all, is I think with the local elections that will happen over the next couple of years, if the Labour Party starts creating austerity again, they will lose a lot of the local councillors that we have in local government across Britain. I think that will be the first deciding point on that. At the moment, the thing that I've noticed on Facebook, and it's the first time I've ever seen anything like it because Rishi Sunak didn't have that issue, is that Keir Starmer is being vilified. He's being cartooned in all sorts of ways at the moment that I've never seen before. And I think the reality is that a lot of people are very disappointed that all of a sudden what they thought would be a change, because that was the key word for the Labour Party, was to create change. All they've done is create austerity.
Well, it's a very tough existence, and of course, Ian, we've got a lot more to talk about, and I think the next 60 days of the presidential election are going to be lots of topics, and again, we are very closely. I don't think there's a closer ally between the United States than the United Kingdom, and it's fascinating as we talk to see the parallels about debt, about pensioning, again our Social Security crisis, the concern about the national debt, and one of the things we haven't touched on at all today that we'll have to touch on in a future episode is international cooperation and security, because one of the things that could put quite a ringer into this deal would be a world war or something similar to that.
I totally agree. I mean, just very quickly, I was in Lebanon last year, and I met Hezbollah as well whilst I was in Lebanon. And I think as well, the reality at the moment is, very quickly, do you think Trump would support Ukraine?
And the answer is, I think he's forced to do that. But you know what? Let me ask you quickly. Can you tell our audience how they can get more information about you?
It's basically just if you dial in Ian Pelham Turner on any sort of Google site or something, I'm all over the place. Do you know what, David? I'm never quite sure how you get in contact with me. I have people who do, and so I'm reliant upon that. But I'm all over the place. So if you just Google search my name, it comes up in all sorts of ways.
That sounds good. Well, folks, we appreciate your joining us today for this initial episode of Global Politics, and you can find us on the USA Global Network, and we hope you will join us again in the future. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein, and you can just look me up. I have 2 books on Amazon, and my consulting firm is called Claremont Management Group, and it's ClaremontManagementGroup.com. And we're going to be talking in the future, of course, about the outcome of the British election and how that impacts the British people and how it impacts us here in the United States.